What's a bare minimum skill everyone should have, but surprisingly, many people don't. Story 1. I have a friend who thinks if it's left over after bills are paid, that means I should spend it all. He has zero concept of budgeting saving. Then when his car breaks, he cries and complains to his dad to pay for it. Bro, you're 35 years old. You make more than enough to have an emergency fund. Answer: OMG, that was my ex-husband. I had no idea when I married him. He was a business owner. That makes it seem like he should be good with money, right? I was the breadwinner, but let him handle the bills so that I wasn't managing everything. I opened a bill one day and it showed an overdue balance. I asked him what happened and why it wasn't paid. He responded that it was absurd that they had to be paid every month. He was paying them as he saw fit, every 60 days or so. We had a joint account for house things, but separate accounts for everything else. I put enough in the joint account for mortgage and incidental emergencies. He was contributing some to the joint account to cover bills. When I asked him to show me how much he had in his personal account, and it was $200, I was absolutely astounded. I asked what he was doing with everything he made that didn't go to cover bills. He responded with, "I spend it. What else am I supposed to do with it? Do die." FYI, he was 36 at the time. That is one of many reasons our marriage only lasted for all of 3 years. His true colors came out after that paper was signed. Story 2. Situational awareness in general. If you're walking on a public sidewalk, airport, etc., especially if it's crowded, you shouldn't just stop or suddenly change directions without paying attention to who is around you and where they're moving. Pull over to the side of the walkway just like you would if you were driving a car, though I guess plenty of people suck at that too. Answer. Clicked on the thread for this answer. I've been studying abroad the last few weeks and have been taking a lot of public transit, flights, trains, metro. The amount of people who take up both lanes on an escalator or walkway with their bag or just the way they stand, just stop walking in the middle of pathways, stand right in front of doors or bottlenecks. I almost lost my shoot on a guy for just standing in front of a bathroom entrance, having a conversation. He just wouldn't move. Whole bunch of other things. People just get to these public spaces and immediately go clueless on basic etiquette. I think of walking everywhere just like driving. If you wouldn't be able to do it safely in a car, don't do it on your feet. Obviously, there are some differences and everything, but I find this system works really well for me. Story 3. Scrolled far and didn't see it, but basic first aid. Basic first aid might be one of those things you will never need, really. But even knowing to apply pressure to wounds and stuff, a lot of people don't actually understand, and they stand there dumbfounded or actually make things worse in an actual emergency. ABCs and stop the bleeding can literally save people's lives very easily. Used to work in EMS, and you would be surprised by how much of it is really basic stuff that people can do before EMS arrives and actually be useful. For example, someone just had their index and middle finger degloved by a press machine. Guess what the coworker did to help a lot? They grabbed a roll of duct tape and taped his entire hand up while it was still bleeding. Always remember how dumb the average person is, and remember that 50 of people are dumber than that. Answer. I did the first level of first aid course in my country, and one thing that became apparent is how much brain power people lose when there's an emergency, even if it's an exercise and no one is actually hurt. I saw people lose all train of thought and forget common sense and what we had learned just hours before, which speaks even more to the need of learning basic first aid and, if possible, always on a hands-on course. Story 4. Reading a map and basic cardinal directions. I'm blown away that so many people can't point east if I tell them which way north is. Story 5. Financial skill, learn to handle your finances, not shopping more than you can afford, and no unnecessary loans. Even if you had more money, if you don't address your spending habits, you will be right back where you are now within 6 months. Story 6. It's shameful the poor levels of swordsmanship in today's youth. When the orcs come over the wall, they're just gonna die. Story 7. I've met a surprising number of people who can't swim. It's a basic survival skill, plus it's fun and great exercise. Answer. My dad's side of the family, myself included, lack buoyancy. We all sink. I went to a mineral lake once. The water is so heavy you have no option but to float. Apparently, my jerk is more buoyant than any part of me because it kept floating up, and I'd end up face down in the water. Jerk up, face down. That's the way I like to drown was my song of the day. Story 8. The ability to research and problem solve on their own. I recently replaced my own transmission after reading a book at the library and watching a video. Now I understand a job like that requires tools and space that not everyone has access to, but it really isn't that hard taking something apart and putting it back together if you're paying attention, labeling items, documenting procedures, and following instructions. There was a time in my life I didn't feel I was handy, but then I built my first computer, and after that, everything clicked. As in, why can't I apply this process to a larger scale? Turns out I can. Story 9. Admitting guilt. When an honest man discovers he is mistaken, he either ceases to be honest or ceases to be mistaken. Story 10. Basic computer skills. Pretty much every office job description in 2025 somewhere says strong computer skills, yet most have little to none. Story 11. I work with 12 17-year-olds at a mental health facility. The amount of times I've heard, I don't know how to read a clock, or taught someone how to read a clock, is in the 100s now. And that's only during my 2 years working there. Story 12. A shocking number of people from all walks of life are only semi-literate. They can read a sign, directions, a short written piece that already aligns with their interests, but can't actually read and understand a book or technical document. Story 13. How to differentiate effect and effect. I don't consider myself a grammar pig, but it even seems that published authors sometimes struggle with those two words. Story 14. Math. Order comes to 4.26. I give the cashier $5 and tell them I have the penny reaching into my pocket to get it. They've already rung 5s on the register and then freeze, not knowing they just need to give me 3/4 back. Answer. To be fair, this threw me for a loop every once in a while when I worked cashier, while I was also taking calculus in college. I like to think my mental math is fairly strong, but working the register, you fall into autopilot, especially after many hours standing in the same spot, ringing up hundreds of people. Sometimes when people break the cycle, it breaks my brain for a split second, and it has to reboot. Oh well. Story 15. Knowing the difference between the following words and when to use them. To, there, your, woman, women. This one is a verbal thing. It didn't seem to be a problem in the past, but lately it feels hardly anyone knows the difference. Story 16. Basic sewing skills. Nothing fancy. I'm not talking about following a pattern or even using a sewing machine, but the ability to sew on a button, do basic repairs with a needle and thread, etc. is super easy to learn and unbelievably useful. Story 17. Basic cooking and cleaning. I've seen at least 6 times in the last 3 years where a new employee at work would try to do some cleaning by mixing ammonia and bleach and using the wrong tool. I don't know why you would want to use steel wool on glass and think it won't scratch. Story 18. Basic car maintenance. This should be required during driver's education. It's crazy that Becky can speed down the road with a 2,000-pound metal weapon with bald tires, low air pressure, no oil, or any idea what to do when her 2001 Honda Civic blows a tire on the freeway. Story 19. Basic politeness. You have no reason to look or sound like you want to strangle someone you've never met before. Story 20. Changing a tire. I recently had to show a 32-year-old man how to change a car tire. I always had until everything got too expensive. He caught on quick. He just had never had to do it before that day. Answer. Indeed, I feel like a lot of simple skills are just that. They can figure it out in their head because you can often just look at certain things and instantly see how to do it. But there's some low-level anxiety about doing it wrong and fudge something up or just looking like a fool. Once helped a lad who just wanted a second set of eyes for the same reason. He pretty much had it down. I only really needed to help him with the jack point and some of the more stubborn nuts. It'll be the same story for a lot of fluid changes as well. They can probably work it out themselves quite easily. Oil especially. It's just getting over the initial intimidation and being able to trust in yourself. Story 21. Swimming and floating as well as basic accounting. You look into your immediate and intermediate future with money planning ability and a basic prudence. Story 22. A human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. Robert A. Heinlein, Time Enough for Love. Story 23. How to address an envelope. I was shocked to find that my son had no knowledge of this when we were mailing his graduation invitations. He had no clue where the addresses go or where to put the stamp. I learned from this that I can't assume that just because I learned something in school that it's still being taught. My bad. Answer. Also, don't assume that since he didn't know it, they didn't teach it at school. I was taught that in 2nd, 3rd grade, so was my son. There's no way he's going to remember it if the next time he uses it is in 9 to 10 years. My kid does send out letters, but still needs help, just like I did. I just was forced to write thank you letters and got it drilled in me at 8th grade confirmation. Story 24. Critical thinking on the most basic of levels seems to be at an all-time low. Everyone wants a quick answer instead of evaluating the situation themselves, taking stock of resources, and applying relevant info. Which is a shame because figuring things out yourself is so much more valuable. It's personal, so it sticks more, and you're better able to apply that experience to other things. Story 25. Sewing, simple stitch, button, hem. I was in the Air Force and Army and we had to sew patches on all the time. Story 26. Making a proper apology and self-reflection. We would live in such a different world if everyone had these skills. Story 27. Knowing how to sweep and wash dishes by hand. It is really not that difficult. I don't get why some people just don't know how to do it. Story 28. Emotional regulation. So many people grow up never learning how to process their own feelings in a healthy way. They either shut down, explode, or blame others. Emotional maturity should be taught as a life skill. Story 29. Reading a map seems like several generations have been ruined by Google Maps telling when and where to turn. Answer. People who are visual processors, I believe, have a much more natural ability to read maps, floor plans, blueprints, diagrams. I am a very visual learner, and I grew up being able to very easily understand these types of visual information and wanted to be an architect. A large part of my job now is designing floor plans, and when I present them to others, I come across so many people who always start with a disclaimer that they don't know how to read floor plans. To me, it's so obvious, but it obviously isn't a basic common skill because so many people need help interpreting the lines, etc. Side note, I'm also obsessed with maps now and collect map books and atlases and create maps as a little weekend hobby. Story 30. Show up on time efficiently. Make a decision. If people could do these two things, I'd like them all so much more. Story 31. Media literacy would be good. How to ask what kind of source am I looking at? How can I tell? What bias can I detect? Hint, everything has bias. Does the bias veer into the territory of unfairness? What kind of source am I reading? Is it news or opinion, etc., and so forth? Story 32. I think that, as a bare minimum, you should be able to drive before you're given a driver's license, like half the people on the road just can't. Story 33. How to vote for someone that will actually work for them or don't vote at all. Also, how to swim and change a flat tire. How to cook a basic meal. Story 34. To read. Even if people technically knows how to read, barely anyone does. No one reads the freaking manual, the signs, the documentation of what they are using. Story 35. Driving. The left lanes are passing lanes. If you're not passing someone, move the F over to the rightmost lane. Story 36. Late to the party, but I would say genuinely listening. It helps build connections, you can learn from others, and is completely free to do. It just takes focus. Story 37. Basic awareness of your surroundings. I'm not expecting people to be fudge samurais who feel a blade of grass moving 10 meters behind them. Just knowing not to stop at the top of the elevator or stopping suddenly in the middle of the sidewalk would be nice. Story 38. Self-advocacy. So many people just roll over when something happens they don't like, rather than think, okay, who do I talk to and what do I say to fix this problem? Story 39. Emotional regulation road rage is fudge stupid. Yes, that guy drives like a male body part. No, you shouldn't try and run him off the road brake, check him, because that's really fudge stupid. Story 40. Being fully literate. There's a shockingly scary amount of folks in the US that are functionally illiterate, and even more that can mostly read but flat out won't, because it's too difficult. Signs with written warnings and instructions mean nothing to these people, hence why we need pictures and simpler instructions on everything, despite only having a single dominant spoken language. It's straight up shameful how we've stopped trying to address this problem in the US. Story 41. Good penmanship. WTF, are they teaching in school? Doctors, if all people should have flawless writing. Oh yeah, who needs it? Everything is computer-driven. And when that goes, we are back to writing like 2-year-olds. Lazy. Story 42. In the words of Steve Buscemi in Reservoir Dogs, learn to fucking type. I've been supporting myself at office jobs since 1989 in a bunch of different industries. And really, it's the same job no matter what the office. architecture, sportswear sales, advertising, television, finance. The first thing they normally would take into consideration is how fast and accurately can you type. Story 43. Cooking. I'm genuinely shocked at how many people don't know how to cook even a few basic meals at home. Story 44. My mom died at 92, having never learned to swim. She tried several times, but just couldn't do it. To be fair, we live in the middle of England, as far from the sea as you can get in the UK, and swimming wasn't something they did at school back then. By the time she tried to learn, I think she developed a fear of the water. She never learned to drive either. Again, she had lessons, lots of lessons, but one day she bumped the car trying to park it in the garage and never sat in the driver's seat again. Story 45. Cooking. You don't need to be a gourmet chef, but if you cannot prepare a meal and rely on ready-made meals or takeaway, then you have problems. Story 46. Being able to cook halfway decently. It's insane how many people in this economy no less either can't or refuse to. Story 47. How to clean a bathroom. Even if you were born with a silver spoon up your jerk, you should know how to clean a bathroom, because you should understand what the people who clean your bathroom have to do. Story 48. One skill is how to use the search function so you don't post a question that has already been posted twice today. Story 49. A signature. The amount of people who just write their name in cursive or in block letters is astounding. I remember when I was a little kid, I asked my dad, why does his signature look the way it does? And he told it is because you don't want it to be easily copied by other people. Seems like a lot people don't understand that anymore. You want your signature to be your own. Story 50. Cleaning up after themselves. It's bare minimum standard, in my opinion. Yes, I am aware there are legit cases of physical or mental health issues, but this is not the case for many who just choose to not take care of their space, shared or not. Just developing a few small habits makes all the difference. Story 51. Basic technological literacy. I mean terms like Wi-Fi versus cellular, monitor versus computer, and how to manage and secure critical accounts online. We have reached a point where this is an essential skill, and it isn't just boomers who don't know the first thing about how to do this. Adding to this, basic troubleshooting concepts. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily complex stuff like malware or the transmission on your car. I mean, I have been on calls with customers who literally could not tell me how something isn't working. They could not describe the kind of noise something makes or under what basic conditions, basic like when turning or when I plug it in. Being able to identify and describe a problem is a huge communication skill that extends beyond just fixing broken appliances or household things, but also into relationships and behavior. Story 52. Critical thinking, particularly self-reflection. Challenging assumptions, reasoning oneself into positions being true rather than right. Story 53. Media literacy. Being able to tell if something is fake or is biased towards an agenda. This will become increasingly important. Story 54. Identifying sales and marketing bullshit as well as incredibly common techniques. Useful for everything from not blowing your paycheck to not being taken advantage of to seeing past political promises. Story 55. IDEC if it counts as a skill per se, but too many people aren't aware of the amount of space they're currently occupying. For example, I work in a hospital. If I'm moving a bed towards you, you can't be taking up half the hallway all by your lonesome. Get over so we can be each other. Because the giant jerk bed made to hold a 1,000-pound human cannot shrink, but you can certainly move. Or if you have a backpack on, you have to be wary of the extra foot or so of length you have behind you. You can't just be swinging around everywhere. Move your shopping carts out of the middle of the aisles when other people are around. There's so many examples I could come up with. Story 56. Critical thinking and problem solving. I blame technology we use to have to find the answers. Now you just Google it. Story 57. Housework. Cooking, cleaning, budgeting, and planning. It's scary the amount of people my age who use living at home as an excuse. Then when they move out, there's constant fights with their housemates over their lack of ability to do basic tasks expected of every adult. Story 58. Reading a map. All you have to do is look around at what you've already passed or are next to, and then look down at where that is on the map. Went on this youth experience at 16, and only one other person knew how to read a map out of the 20 people on our walking group. No one else could figure out where we were, while stood right next to a road, so pretty obvious. Inevitably, myself and this other person doing all the work while everyone else followed stewed our brains in the heat, and we ended up having to leave early from heat stroke, while the rest were left to themselves and the reluctant guidance of the adult supervision, LOL. Story 59. Sewing saves so much time and money. Literally just being able to put a stick in something would eliminate the fast fashion world. Story 60. I'm increasingly meeting people who don't know how to drive. It's not that they're disabled, nor do they originate from live in a place where driving is uncommon. They just don't want to learn. Story 61. Knowing how to change the oil on your car and taking off or putting on a tire. I've saved so much money just knowing how to do those. Story 62. How to cook for yourself. Just a few things is enough, but the amount of people who could burn a bowl of cereal is fudge astounding to me. Story 63. Cooking. Stop the DoorDash, seriously. Get yourself a wood-cutting board, chef's knife, decent pots and pans, and a silicone spatula. Watch YouTube. Nothing more rewarding than cooking for your friends. Story 64. Tying your shoes properly. This is something that even I can't do, even after being taught at least twice how to do it. I just double knot my laces to a tightness that allows me to get my runners on and off easily, and so that they stay on my feet while using them. Story 65. Wipe your own jerk. Basic hygiene. And let me be clear, there are people who have legitimate reasons why these are difficult. My problem is not with them. Story 66. Cooking. I don't mean you gotta be a world-class chef. You should be able to cook basic food just for yourself. Story 67. Well, just the skills of living alone, like do your laundry, cook and clean afterwards, etc. Just don't be a baby who expects everything to be done by someone else. You're not 12 anymore. Story 68. Cooking. You don't have to be a chef, but life is much more inexpensive healthy if you can cook your own food out of basics. Story 69. Personal finance, cooking, civics, writing, humility, empathy. Sadly, all in short order in the current system we have in the States. Story 70. Reading comprehension. There are so many grown jerk professionals I work with that I swear are borderline illiterate. Story 71. Has anyone said basic first aid? Like CPR and stop the bleed? Man alive, I've used this when I least expected it, and was really glad I took some free classes.